Perfect. Thank you. So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and to speak. It's my second time at this event, and so it's when I saw the call for abstracts, I knew I wanted to send one, seeing as last year I had a great experience. In any case, my contribution today goes on, as Professor Julio already mentioned, to explore the governance of seeds in space agriculture, and more specifically, the risk. It focuses on the risk that the capitalist logic of enclosure, that is unfortunately so pervasive on Earth, will be projected into outer space. So the main argument is that the governance of seeds in extraterrestrial habitats represents a crucial, like truly a crucial legal and ethical as well test case for the collective future of humankind beyond Earth. And the key claim that I push forward and advance is that seeds that will be cultivated and or adapted for use in space should be governed as commons rather than commodities. This is because by doing so, we would be recognizing them as shared heritage. And I personally believe that such a claim is both legally defensible under space law and also normatively necessary to prevent indeed the descent into chaos by extending capitalism and capitalistic logics and the accumulation logic of capitalism into the outer space domain. As a short, I guess, pretext before my presentation, it's obviously important to highlight how this is very much, I guess, novel as a topic. And so I would very much appreciate any feedback on it. I'll share my email later on, but yeah, this is I guess, a small heads up. So when it comes obviously to agriculture, seeds are its foundation. However, the main problem I find is that the governance of seeds has become, I guess, deeply contested. Specifically over the past 50 years, we can see at the global level the progressive commodification of plant genetic resources. This has happened through the adoption of patents, through plant variety rights and proprietary breeding systems that have truly gone on to transform seeds from being shared agricultural goods into effectively intellectual property. Specifically, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, which was adopted in 2001 under the auspices of FAO, was specifically designed to address this enclosure. And it went on to establish a multilateral system of access and benefit sharing went on to cover a list of crops that are essential to global food security. Interestingly enough, the treaty also recognized the rights of farmers, including the right, for example, to save, to use, to exchange, and to sell farm-saved seeds. There would be a lot to say about this, but obviously I have a limited amount of time. The main issue I see with this treaty is the fact that it has truly, despite being a great effort, it has truly struggled to prevent the expansion of intellectual property rights into I guess this domain, yeah. The scope, in fact, of patents on genetic sequences and plant traits has truly grown. And we can really see how, commercial control is increasingly concentrated in a handful of transnational corporations. And there are many scholars that have shown this, but this trend has truly led to a sort of biocapitalism trend in which the genetic foundations of our food, the food that is truly the sustenance of humankind's existence, are indeed controlled through proprietary law. At the same time, I believe that the idea of seeds as global commons has indeed gained action, gained traction, not action, gained traction among social movements, particularly the ones that are focused and concerned on with food sovereignty and environmental justice. And this approach specifically insists that seeds, as the material basis of human survival, cannot be enclosed within exclusive rights regimes, but rather they should be managed cooperatively and shared equitably from both within and across borders, so at a global level. So obviously now let's turn to space. And as humankind is really, peeking its head through I guess, our atmosphere and looking at entertaining long duration space missions and future settlements on the moon, Mars, and in orbit, these questions are indeed particularly relevant. Space agriculture obviously will depend on closed ecological systems. That is a reality that we cannot escape. That are, for example, designed to recycle water, air, and waste while producing food autonomously from Earth. And specifically, the seeds that are going to be adapted for these extreme conditions will be the cornerstones of such closed ecological systems. However, the legal and ethical question truly is important of who will own these seeds, because obviously developing these specific seeds is going to be particularly time expensive and also costly from a financial perspective. Because if they're developed under corporate research programs and therefore protected by intellectual property law, we indeed may witness the extension of terrestrial patterns of enclosure of seeds into outer space as well. And so this is particularly problematic because control over life-supporting genetic resources, such as our crops, would indeed lie in the hands of a very few and very powerful actors. Most likely, if we see at the new space trend in the last 25 years, such actors would be private companies that have the technological and financial capability to operate in space. And this is particularly dangerous because it would not only entrench global inequities, but also reproduce beyond Earth the same asymmetries of access and control that characterize the Earth's food systems. And so, in this sense, space agriculture could truly become the new frontier, the next frontier of capitalism, as a sort of, I guess, laboratory to commodify life itself and better the cornerstone of human survival in outer space. So obviously, we have to also look at the legal background from a space law perspective. The outer space is not a legal vacuum, obviously. It is indeed governed by it's a distinct regime that was conceived precisely to avoid appropriation and conflict. Obviously, it was not catered to seeds and agriculture, but it's still interesting to examine for the purpose of this presentation. Specifically, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 establishes that the exploration and use of outer space shall be carried out for the benefit and in interest of all countries. And that outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, is not subjected to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, use, or occupation or other means. So this is essential, I think, in our legal analysis. Later on, we can also look at the Moon Agreement of 1979 that is potentially not very informative of what is state practice because it was only ratified by a limited number of states. But it is interesting to examine because this instrument took the position of the Outer Space Treaty a step further by recognizing lunar resources as a common, a potential common heritage of mankind. Um, and yeah, this is particularly interesting because it really puts the language of global commons in outer space. This language is indeed one that closely echoes the language utilized in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea regarding the deep seabed and its resources. Now, from a legal perspective, these instruments are useful because they can be seen as establishing a foundational principle of non-appropriation and shared benefit. This is because the governance of outer space is therefore meant to reflect cooperation, equity, and mutual benefit rather than ownership or competition and control and appropriation, obviously. So if we apply these principles to the question of seeds, I think that we can draw a useful analogy. Specifically, just in the same way as outer space is a shared domain by its clear nature, physical nature even, I believe that the biological foundations that sustain humankind on Earth, but could also be essential for the sustenance of humankind in outer space, should be treated as part of a shared human heritage. I believe also that recognizing seeds as commons when it comes to space agriculture specifically, and I personally believe that they should be recognized as commons generally, but that's a different conversation. I believe that recognizing seeds as commons when it comes to space agriculture would ensure that no state, company, or private individual can go on to exercise exclusive control over essential life supporting resources, which would be extremely useful in preventing what could emerge as a sort of bio imperialism in outer space. In like a situation in which the private actors would go on to extend their property rights over the means of survival in new planetary environment, extraplanetary environments, effectively holding the reins of humankind's future. And I believe that this approach, which is obviously commons-based, would also align with the environmental principles that are embedded both in international environmental law as well as in space law. Because it would also, for example, reflect the precautionary principle, the duty to avoid harmful contamination, and the obligation to use outer space for peaceful purposes and for the benefit of all humankind. I clearly don't have time nor space to elaborate further on this, but I'm always interested in talking about this, so feel free to hit me up. And I think it's also interesting how analog missions on Earth, such as those run both by ESA, NASA, and also private institutions, could serve as regulatory test beds, in a sense, for developing a commons-oriented governance framework or multiple ones. Because these missions could effectively be pioneering the open access to seed libraries to, for example, share genetic databases and to set up cooperative management models for bioregenerative life support systems. And so I believe that this topic is particularly important because it's not necessarily topical right now, but it will be inevitably. And it's not just theoretical because the commercialization of outer space is already accelerating. It has been since the early 2000s. And we can see truly when just turning on the news how private actors are increasingly involved in satellite deployment, resource prospecting, and also conceptualizing future lunar mining operations. That's all over the news if you're both in the space sector and also outside of it. And so we can really see also how the language of commercial utilization, and I've spoken about this in a few conferences over the last month and a half, is truly potentially reshaping the interpretation of the Outer Space Treaty itself. Because language is never apolitical, it's never just words, it's always instructive of the I guess, cosmology that we're adopting. So I think what is essential here is that if we are not careful, the colonial and capitalist logics that have truly shaped and structured the Earth's history of resource exploitation will truly easily be reproduced in the governance of outer space. And so seeds are not just essential in the sense of that they should be classified as global commons when talking about space agriculture, but they also are a symbol and a potential focal point for this critique to the extension of capitalism in outer space, because they truly embody the difference between a world that is built on extraction and that is built on cooperation and regeneration. So yeah, I think that truly it is important, not just because of the topic itself, but because how we govern the most basic bricks, I guess, of life in space will truly reveal whether outer space becomes another arena of accumulation or potentially one that is truly sustainable and a new commons full on. So, to go towards the conclusion, the claim that I advance is very straightforward. The fact that food systems in space should be treated as matters of collective survival, not private accumulation. Clearly, this requires, as I've said, the extension of the commons logic that is already embedded, in my opinion, in space law to the biological domain of agriculture. We would clearly need to create a governance structure that ensures access, for example, transparency and equitable participation, also for stakeholders that don't necessarily have access to space themselves. It also means, for example, rejecting the idea that technological innovation must depend on enclosure and capitalism and proprietary incentives. And I think that this approach would not only preserve and truly embrace the spirit at the heart of the Outer Space Treaty and space law more generally, but also resonate with the broader movement for decommodifying life on Earth that we're seeing, thankfully, raising the past years. So I believe that in this sense, resisting the expansion of capitalism into outer space is not an act of idealism, but it's rather a necessary step that is essential for also our survival on Earth. So to conclude, the governance of seeds in space agriculture is not as marginal an issue as it might seem. It's a mirror, from my perspective, through which we can truly, uh, have a look, have a peek at the future of human expansion and human life, both on Earth and beyond it. Because if we allow the same structures that have been put in place in the last hundreds of years to be extended and expanded to outer space, then I think it's only going to lead to destruction and chaos, and ultimately the downfall of humankind. Because we're already seeing right now the consequences of capitalism on Earth. So why would we, with that knowledge, want to extend it into outer space, especially since this domain is so essential to our survival? Well, so that's my presentation. The takeaway, I guess, is that, sorry, the choice between these two futures is still very much open, and I think it's essential that people entertain with conferences such as this one because it really helps to share these ideas and potentially talk of how we can even at an individual level try and fight the expansion of capitalism and other um, damaging systems into the future of humankind. Um, I will send my email in the chat in case you want to send any questions or proposals of collaboration or anything, and I will be gladly yeah, happy to collaborate and answer any questions. Unfortunately, I will not be able to stay on for the rest of this panel, but as I said, I'm very much looking forward to hearing your comments. Thank you very much.